Good colleagues, this is an informal conversation, and so this would be a good time for us to switch on your camera and your microphone if you're comfortable to do that. You don't have to, but it's a little bit different from the previous meeting where we were wanting to reduce the number of faces and noises because there were so many people. Now we're a group of 5 at the moment. We might be a couple more, but if we divided the 78 equally amongst the 13 groups, there should be 6 in a group. So I guess this is most likely it. So just a few words of introduction from me. The first is that I'm going to be recording today's session. You should be able to see it at the top of your screen recording. And we'll then share that with everybody else on the website afterwards. The reason for that is that there were quite a number of people that wanted to join in 2 or 3 groups and had to choose because you can only be in one group at a time. So this will give an opportunity for people who are interested to listen to us chatting about this topic, which is longitudinal research. So if you're not wanting to do longitudinal research, you're in the wrong group, but that's what we're here for. I would also suggest, if that's okay with you, if you just type your name in the chat so that we can just see who each other are. I'll save the chat as well afterwards, and then that'll give us a little record, because we might want to stay in touch after today's session. And so I'm not so good at talking and chatting at the same time. So in case we want to stay in touch, we can do that. This session will probably land up being closer to 45 minutes because it's now 1/2 and we need to start the next session at 20 past the hour. So we'll probably close this group at about 1/4 whatever the next hour is in your time zone. And I think that's about it. I was going to say that we'd lock the group if we got to more than 25 people, but I don't think that's likely to happen. So I'm going to hand over to Kiran. So just first, I'm Adrian. I think you may have met me earlier on. And Kiran, who's also waving, is co-chairing with me, and I'm going to hand over to her for the next little bit. So we're going to try and share the facilitation of this discussion.
Yeah. I am Kiran Modi. I'm from India. And unlike everyone here, I think I'm the only non-academic, but with great interest in research. So I'm a practitioner. We are running group homes for orphaned and abandoned children without parental care. And when they become 18, and then we give them aftercare. But in India, the laws and policies are very good, but the implementation is not so good. So we realized that most of the care leavers, they have problems. So that's how I got interested in INTRAC. And, and we've been doing some bit of research. Maybe I get a chance to talk about it. And I really welcome this group. And there is a lot of learning here, which we can learn from each other. So like Adrian has introduced himself, I have introduced myself. We would love to know a little bit about each one of you. Thank you. Carrie, why don't you go at it?
Maybe I can start. I'm going to keep myself on mute for most of the time unless I'm speaking, because there's my 12-month-old daughter downstairs who she's discovering her own voice right now. So, my name is Alexandre Blanchet. I'm in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, working at École nationale d'administration publique with Martin Goyette on the big EGEP project. This is a longitudinal study looking at a bit more than 1,000 youth exiting out of the care system in Quebec. So our model is mostly the Midwest study. I'm not originally from social work. I've done my PhD and postdoc in political science, political psychology, political behavior, democracy, and that kind of thing. But Martin recruited me to do data analysis and lead the data analytics team that we have. We have a growing team here in Montreal. So this is what we're doing. And so I'm interested in longitudinal research, both because of social work, but also because of my own research. So more political science research that I do using also longitudinal data.
Thanks, Alexandra.
Hi, my name is Carla Montserrat. I work as a professor and a researcher at the University of Girona in Spain, in Catalonia, in the north of Spain. And I am also the director of a research team on childhood, youth, and community. And the main areas of research are about children in care and young people living care. Regarding young people living care, we are doing research from many years ago. We started in 2008 with the GP project, that it was a European project to analyze the pathways to education of young people living care. And since there, we are doing research on caregivers at the national level and also international level. I don't know if well, maybe then after I can explain more about the current research that now we are carrying out. And Laura is also from Barcelona. Laura, we
want to go next?
Yeah.
Laura, the micro.
Yeah, thanks, Karma. So I introduce myself. Yeah, my name is Laura Arnau Sabatés, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Social Pedagogy at the Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona. So, and I've been doing research in different educational areas, but over the last 10 years, my research has been focused on different aspects related to caregivers' transition into adulthood. So, and within this topic, I'm currently involved in two research projects. So the first project is called Kaleami, which is a longitudinal panel study. And I mean, we are at the very beginning. So currently we are conducting the first wave of interviews. And in a way, we were inspired by Mark Courtney and the Midwest and Cal Youth studies, both of which were conducted by Mark Courtney, and we wanted to replicate in a very small scale. So these studies in Catalonia, in Spain. So, and basically we are at that conducting this study, and the aim is basically keeping track on different young people over 8 years, since they are 18 until they reach 26, and to obtain data with regards to the transition process and the supports that they receive, and they turn out to be the most effective. No? So, and I'm really interested in learning more about your research and your longitudinal studies. So I hope that the session will be really interesting.
Okay, shall I then? I hope that you can hear me, because I'm in the train and I'm now in an environment that is very poor internet.
But we are able to hear you. Yeah. Thank you.
You can hear me? Okay, so I will talk and then check meanwhile whether you're still listening. So I'm Annemiek. I work as a professor at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. And well, I did my PhD on secure residential youth care. So I focused on how, in a longitudinal study, how they did during and after secure residential care. And so now I am involved in quite some different projects. And some of these are focused on family-focused residential care, on small-scale residential care, and I was also involved in an application for a research project together with Australia and Norway. So let's see whether that will be funded, but that is specifically focused on young people leaving care and their experiences in these 3 countries. So I don't know if you heard everything I said.
Yes, it was very, very clear,
This
very
is a small
audible.
introduction and what I do.
Thank you.
Okay, that's good. So I really like empirical research and being involved in also young people and see how we are doing. So that's about it.
Great, great. So Adrian, where do we go from here?
And I'll put myself on mute because of the noise.
Yeah, sure. So we have shared little bit everyone, you know, about the work that we've been doing. It's very interesting to hear such different things coming from, you know, different parts of the world. It's very, very interesting. So Adrian, why don't you lead this conversation, and let's go to the next phase after the introductions.
Yes, I think, thank you, Kiran. We wanted to just open up. This is a fairly free-floating, unstructured space for us to share things that we've learned that we're proud of, whether we think are interesting, that we may want to share with other people. And I think it's also a space where we may want to ask questions like, I'm struggling with this. Does anybody have something that you've learned? So this is kind of what this space is for. It's an informal space. We should be really sitting around. I've got an unfortunately now empty mug of coffee, or a glass of whiskey, unfortunately also empty. But that's kind of the idea. Imagine that we're just at a pub somewhere and we're just having a good yak about our research.
Very interesting.
So maybe I could kick off with just something I wanted to share, because I've just found this so interesting this year with COVID. One of my doctoral students is doing research with intellectually disabled care leavers. So care leavers who have some intellectual impairment. And the idea was that she would interview them just before they left care, which is usually at the end of the year. So just around Christmas time, she did the first interview, and then she would interview them every 4 months until the end of this year, to see their narrative and their journey towards greater independence. And then, of course, in March this year, COVID just slammed into South Africa and closed everything down. And so her research question, which is about how do they travel towards independence, is not an answerable question anymore, because nobody's independent. We're all stuck at home, can't work, can't get out, can't socialize. So it really threw her doctoral study way up into the air. And we've done a couple of things to try and address that. The one is that we agreed that she would do 2 further, because she did 2 interviews, the baseline and the first follow-up, before the lockdown happened. So we agreed that she would do 2 interviews after the end of lockdown, which we think will be next year sometime. So she'll extend the duration of the study. And then the other thing which we decided is that she would continue to collect data through Zoom or something similar during the lockdown, to hear how COVID has in a sense impacted on this journey towards young adulthood. So we actually decided to make COVID a friend of the longitudinal process rather than an enemy or a confounding variable. And she's collected some fascinating data in these in-between interviews about how they've experienced COVID, how COVID has impacted on themselves, also on the families, because we interview the family as well, and how it's influenced this journey towards young adulthood. So we're busy actually writing up this unexpected article that we didn't think we would be doing, simply because COVID really throws a spanner in the works of a longitudinal study. And I suspect we're going to find the same with the larger study that we're doing. I just wondered also if other people had similar experiences of COVID being an unexpected confounding variable.
So it would be very interesting to hear from others, but if I could just pitch in, we had also started a kind of a longitudinal study with some care leavers. Again, you know, we could also collect data over 6 months, And we had selected some 10 people, and the idea was we will be tracing their journey over the years. And because of COVID, now at least 7 of them are lost to us. You know, but with no money, their mobiles gone, accommodation gone, and they are untraceable. So I don't know what will happen to this study. So I would love to know from the other participants, do you have any such COVID experience of, doing a longitudinal with your cohort and something happened?
Maybe I can jump in with our experience. COVID has not impacted us as much as maybe some others. But what we're doing is between our big waves, we call back every participants to just keep in touch with them and update their phone numbers, or they tend to move a lot, and so we like to just keep in touch 2 or 3 times in between the waves, just to keep their phone numbers, mostly because this is how we are able to reach them. Most of these youths also use Facebook, and so we were able to have ethics approval to contact our participants through Facebook, which has been extremely helpful to us to finding them again. And we have 2 people in the team who are on the ground in different community centers, mostly looking for our participants. And so when they find these participants, they're able to just connect with them and try to keep in touch with them, because obviously some of them are really hard to reach. So mostly what we've done with COVID is that we somewhat reported our 3rd wave, which was supposed to be to start next fall. We will probably start it in the winter, in January or perhaps February or around that time. And we have included some questions about COVID in our phone interview. It's not really an interview, but it's just a phone conversation, again, meant to keep in touch with every participant. But we have included some questions in there just to benefit from the occasion that we have them on the line. And so we asked them a few questions about how impacted they were by COVID, how they're doing in general, what's their situation, and that kind of thing. So but this phone interview is very small. It's about 2 to 3 minutes. So we just have a very few questions just to have a basic idea of where they are, and then we can include these answers into our further analysis as if they were collected in a bigger wave, but yet this we can take into account that it was in a very small setting of in between real waves, so to speak.
It's quite similar to what you've described initially. So initially we'd said that we wouldn't do this wave of data collection because it didn't seem to have any value. And then we thought, well, the student particularly felt that she needed to stay in touch with participants, particularly because they have intellectual disability. She felt maintaining the relationship was so important. So initially we said, okay, we'll just have a phone call and just hear how they're doing. And then having decided that, we thought, well, instead of just a 2-minute interview, what about a 10-15-minute interview? And so it's like emerging opportunistic research, because life threw us a curveball. So I'm glad to hear that you also stayed in touch. I was also interested about your use of social media, because sometimes researchers seem very like, oh, I can't use social media, confidentiality, ethics, the whole, we get a bit sort of hysterical about that. But the young people themselves are all using it. So I'm in your park, I think, with that.
Yeah, we're not using, say, Facebook so much publicly, but we're using Facebook Messenger so that this is the part of Facebook where we can contact people in private. And so we managed to get the ethics approval to contact you through Facebook, because most of them use their cell phone, and some of them don't even have a phone number. Sometimes they just have a mobile phone that they use to connect to internet and Facebook and so on. So that has been very, very useful for us.
And Alexander, I have a question. So which is, I mean, you use the phone to interview them or you use the media? So because which mean it turns out to be the most effective?
Our first and second wave, during the first and second waves, the interviews were conducted in face-to-face. But in between the waves, when we just contact the youths to keep in touch, then this is done over the phone. The first, what we call interwave contact, these are these in-between waves. The first time we did it, the only goal was to just update their phone numbers and address and so on. But now, as I said, we just included a few questions to just get a basic idea of their situation, and included some questions about COVID. So it's about 5 minutes, a very small phone interview of 5 minutes. Now for the third wave, we are thinking about various options to either collect the data in during face-to-face interviews. So we have a team of about 10 interviewers who go all around Quebec collecting these interviews, but it's obviously very expensive. And because of that, we are considering other options. But I'm kind of divided on this issue, because our participants tend to really like the face-to-face interview format, because they feel like they have someone in front of them instead of just some impersonal interaction. And so I'm a bit worried about this. As a political scientist, I'm used to working with surveys where people from the general population can answer however they want. But this is a kind of a different population, and so I'm a bit divided. I'm curious to hear about what experiences you have with this.
So
somebody's joined. Sorry, Laura, we've got someone who joined the group, and I just thought if we could welcome them before we carry on. So Ana Angelica Campello, I wonder if you if you can hear us, and if you can put your mic on or video and just introduce us so we know who you are. Sorry that we've ignored you for so long. It's possible that you're not able to connect.
Yeah, probably the sound is not going.
Well, if you can connect, we'd love to hear from you when you're ready. So sorry, Laura, you were going to, I interrupted you, my apologies.
Yeah, no, you asked before the impact of COVID in our case. So basically the COVID impact on the methodology of the study, because at the beginning we have scheduled the interviews, like face-to-face interviews, because we are conducting the first wave. But due to the COVID, I mean, we did the interview, we are doing the interviews, phone interviews. So everything has pros and cons, because interviews feel face-to-face. It helps to build up a relationship with the participant, and maybe they feel more committed, more involved into the research project. But I mean, this is the impact, and we need to deal with that. So.
Last study we went with a video, so some kind of video like this. So for some participants it was Zoom if they had access to that, but for many of them it was WhatsApp video, because all the young people have WhatsApp, and so we used the video. We also, because that intellectual disability, and so very often their capacity to communicate is limited, we sent the questions, which was about 5 questions. It was very short, simple, focused. We sent that to the carer and to the young person in advance, so that they could have a bit of a conversation before the interview. And then Wendy, our student, who's somewhere around, she's joined another group, I guess. She's in the disability group, I'm sure, actually. She then interviewed the young person, who's now a young adult really, together with the carer. So almost a conjoint interview, because quite often the adult needs to assist with, what's the right word, sort of an almost interpretation to make sense of. Yeah. So it was also done visually, and I think that she certainly felt that the visual was really important to maintain that sense of connection rather than just an audio.
In our case, many years ago, when we started, we use also face-to-face, but only a phone call if they prefer it. So maybe if they were living away or something like that. But nowadays, we are using mainly WhatsApp video or Skype or Zoom. And we are quite satisfied with this new method. Yes, because...
So how long has been your longitudinal study? How many years you've been doing it with the same cohort?
No, I was speaking in general. So in about research with caregivers. Nowadays, we are doing, one of the projects that we are carrying out is focused on young people between 25 and 35 years old. We were interested in this group because in the past we were doing research with people aged 18 to 21 or 23, and never with more than 25. And then we started to do research on with these young people, and with a multi-method approach. One of them is to contrast data of young people that now are aged between 25 and 35 years old, when they were in care, and when they were in care, when they were 16 years old. So no when they were in care when they were 1 year old, or no. So when they were adolescents and they were still in care. No? So the cohort in Catalonia of these people is about 8,000, that now they are between 25 and 35, and they were in care when they were 16 years old. And we are contrasting this data. Some of them were in residential centers, and others in foster care, in kinship care, or also in foster care. And we are contrasting this data with different departments. The Department of Justice, to know if they were in jail, for example. No, we have some indicators. And then also with the Education Department, to know the maximum level of education, with social services, for example, with drug abuse services, and also mental health services. So different kind of departments, and to contrast data. Our hypothesis is that they are less represented in these indicators as we thought, or as some people usually say. No, we are always listening to people saying that, oh, all the children that they were in care now, they are in jail, or they are I don't know, going to social services, or they have a lot of problems about drug abuse and so on. And we know that they are overrepresented in such indicators, but less than sometimes people think. And this is our hypothesis. So it is our interest is to contrast this data to know exactly how many of them were in jail, no? How many, what is the maximum level of education, and so on. No? And this is one of the things that we are doing with this cohort. And also we are doing questionnaires on launch on social media, and also interviews. And in these last interviews, I think that all of them, maybe except one that was face-to-face, all of them are using WhatsApp video and Skype. So it depends on the situation.
Adrian,
Thanks,
I
Carla.
know that you've been doing some longitudinal studies, 7 years and 10 years like that. Why don't you share your learnings with the group? All of us will benefit from there.
Yeah.
So the challenges that you faced and the kind of, the risks you felt are inherent in a longitudinal study. That would be very interesting to know for all of us.
Yeah, well, I think that the lessons in sense are all hard lessons. It's just not, it's not easy. There's no easy answers. So because we're quite small, we didn't have a lot of funding. We decided to run a rolling cohort, which was something that I'd first encountered in some of the drug trial research that I'd been with HIV back in the earlier days of HIV work. So we enroll participants into the study at the point that they leave the children's home, at aging out of the children's home. So we've continued to do that. So although our first participant enrolled now at 9 years ago, we'll still be enrolling new people at the end of this year. So some people have just left, some left a year ago, some 2 years ago, some 3. So that introduces interesting kind of layers to the data because you have much more participants that are a year or 2 out of care. And then by the time we get to the longest out of care, much fewer participants. But it's worked quite well. I think that the biggest struggle that we've had, which I guess everybody has, is retention. How do you retain your sample? And we've lost lots of participants. And I shudder to even offer a guess. So I decided sorry, it's gone dark because we've just lost electricity. But I had to,
happens
I sort
outside
of
India also.
out a moment ago. I zoned out a moment ago because I switched over to mobile data. So I'm still connected and I'm here. I'm just,
Your voice is breaking, Adrian.
In the dark. But I think that the connection's not great. We've probably lost at least half of our participants and maybe even 2/3 or 3/4 of the ones that were in the first round of participants. And so maintaining the sample size has been a big challenge. And that then becomes a big challenge for us when we're trying to write up our findings. The strength is that we see participants every year over a 7-8 year period. That's the strength. And we use mixed methods. So we have quite deep qualitative data as well as some good, we think, robust quantitative data. And it's the largest study on care leaving in Africa. So we think those are all strengths. But on the other hand, your data integrity becomes increasingly questioned the more you lose participants. So I guess the magic for longitudinal is how do you retain participants? We've tried the thing of asking people to give us multiple contact details of multiple people in different domains of life. And I've used that with the individuals that I interview, have contacted sisters and foster parents and teachers and all kinds of interesting other people to try and find out where's this young person. After a while, you start to feel like you're stalking them. And I had an experience where one of the participants just remained unreachable for a year. So we lost that year with him. And the next year when he agreed to be interviewed again after a 2-year gap, he said that he'd been homeless during that time. And it wasn't so much that he was ashamed of being homeless as much as he was scared I was going to try to rescue him and place him into some kind of shelter. And he didn't want to be rescued. And so we had to recontract my role as researcher, which is I'm here to listen and understand. I'm not your social worker. I'm not here to to help you. I'll refer you if you ask, but that's not my job. So these individual narratives become quite interesting.
True.
So yeah, Kiran, that's I'm hoping to learn as much from this conversation.
Yes. Actually, I also fear, in my experience, I felt over 4 years or 5 years, it was very difficult to retain them. And those who remained, they started getting fatigued. Also, I noticed, sometimes they started giving you the answers that you wanted to hear. Did you face anything like that, or any of the other researchers who are doing longitudinal, would they like to share?
Yeah, maybe I can jump in. I've moved outside because my daughter definitely is testing her voice right now. But yeah, we are at the second wave, and we have managed to on a little bit over 1,100 participants in the first wave. We are now at about 850 participants in the second wave. We obviously use the multiple contact information to try to reach them. We've used Facebook, we've used people on the ground, but my general assessment of how we've managed so far to keep most of our participants is by building rapport with them. And I feel that this is hugely important. We have tried to keep the same interviewers in the second wave and assigned the same interviewers to the same participants for the second wave when that was possible. And we also collect, at the end of each interview, we collect open comments from the participants, and people in the team who have looked at those comments realize that a lot of participants it's really important for them, this rapport that they are building with the interviewer. So we are trying to, this is sometimes hard because interviewers are not social workers. They're not there to intervene or on anything. And we don't want to build a full rapport. But we are trying to portray ourselves as, their ally in whatever it is that they want to do. And we are, in a way for them to have a voice in the public debate. And for some, it's still not. I mean, it's still not good enough, and they associate ourselves with the general care infrastructure in Quebec, which they tend to have a lot of grievances about. But yeah, I think building rapport has been so far the biggest thing for us.
I want to echo that. I mean, even though we've not been very successful in retaining most of our participants, we've also recognized that rapport is so central. And so we try to maintain contact via WhatsApp or Facebook in between the waves, just to kind of keep touching base. And then in our interview, we use an unstructured narrative interview. It's essentially a, tell me what's happened in your life since I last saw you. And that often takes an hour or more. And the participants, if they're willing to participate in that, almost always say how valuable it is for them to tell their story to someone who's just listening and not intervening, who's dispassionate but interested. And that gives them a sense of perspective about their life, and they recognize things that they've missed before. And so sometimes when because of funding, we think we should just cut the qualitative and just do a telephonic quant interview and just, gather the stats. And then we keep coming back to the ethics of care and the fact that we think that actually that part of the interview is why we have more than we could have had otherwise. So I like your point about rapport and how we think about that carefully. And also perhaps it touches into the ethics of care, which is something we've thought about from the beginning, is to what extent is our study actually an aftercare program? the organization that we do our data collection from doesn't have aftercare. They would respond to somebody who makes contact with them, but they don't reach out in any way. There's no alumni association in South Africa. So a young person's really on their own once they leave. So having somebody who reaches out to them every year and says, I'm here to listen to you. I've got 2 hours. I'll meet you wherever you want. I'll buy you lunch and we have a meal and I'm just going to listen. Actually is an intervention, I think. So that boundary between research and practice becomes blurry, but I think in a way that we quite appreciate, actually.
Yeah, for the young
Annemiek,
people.
I'm seeing you. It's so interesting watching you traveling home on the train. It's quite a privilege.
Fascinating.
Well, I'm not
Wondered if you
actually
want to
traveling
jump in.
home. I'm traveling to another place in the Netherlands, and I'm not traveling home because I have a meeting over there. So I will be late back home tonight. But it sounds very interesting. I totally agree with the building rapport. And well, I'm also just involved in a PhD project that is more focusing on case study research, like more going into depth into a couple of cases, not just following up as many young people as possible, but more focusing on a few and then going into depth, also using qualitative interviews. So then you have more opportunity to really build this relationship during the project with the young persons and also with their parents. So I really like this idea of this more case study research. Then you have more measurements, but yeah, you might have less retention. I'm not sure yet, but I like the approach. I like because you also we are focusing, for example, on one residential facility. We compare a couple of residential facilities. So yeah, that's not that high in. Yeah, there are not that many people coming there, young people. So yeah, that's a good way, I think, to do the longitudinal research in a small scale setting, using these case studies, and also using interviews and doing more qualitative types of measurements combined with more quantitative short questionnaires that we use via Etica. So we use an app for young people, and they receive this questionnaire every week, and they can fill it in or they don't. They have a choice, of course, whether they want to do this or not. So then we have more, well, a weekly view on how they are feeling, how they're doing. So, well, I look forward to see what the results are of this project, but we also added some COVID-19 Corona questions. So the same as was already mentioned in this study. So yeah, I like a case study approach and working together with young people more closely. Yeah.
Could you talk a bit more about this this specific project of collecting data weekly? I'm very curious about this. Do you have any like basic description of how it works and what's going on with this?
Additionally, I would like to know about the app that you were talking about and how it helps you in collecting data longitudinally.
Yeah, well, so it was before, of course, COVID that we started this project, but we thought, okay, we want to do this case studies and we want to do this weekly measurements. So then we thought, okay, maybe using an app would be helpful because most young people have a telephone. So we were searching, and the PhD student on this project made an overview of the apps that are available. So I can share this probably with you if you want to. Yeah. And we choose Etica. So Etica is an app, you can search for it. So this was used in Canada also, I think. And it is sufficient with regard to privacy issues because we had to check this. So I think the PhD student who was working on this, yeah, I write it down in his chat. So I think the PhD students on this topic is quite satisfied with this app, and it works quite well. So I'll do it in a chat. I'll write it down, and I can share this list with apps with you if you want. So you can send me an email or something. Well, I currently cannot go into my laptop. Yeah. Okay. Good. And maybe you can also share this COVID question stuff. I was very curious what you added in your research about this.
I'll send it to you. I think most of it is in French, but we have a translation in English as well.
I think that your study, Alexandra, is in a sense going to be, as you know, as you've said, sort of the next big Mark Courtney study. I met with Mark on sabbatical a couple of years ago, and also visited with Matan in Montreal and with Breda, and so it was really lovely to hear the size and the rigor of the study that you're running. And am I right in recalling that you're replicating this in France as well, so that there's it's a dual country study?
There is a collaboration with French researchers, so we tried as much as possible to have some identical indicators when possible. It's fairly complicated because it turns out that the systems are quite different. But we are collaborating with them so that we can eventually get to a valid comparison between what's happening in France and what's happening in Quebec. But the situation, as I said, the systems are so different that sometimes it's very hard to come to very firm conclusions. But I guess that's true of pretty much any international comparisons about this topic. But yes, this is it's true. And the research team in France has been doing some very good work as well. We are coming to very similar conclusions, although from the last report that I've read, they have some very specific issues as well. Like in France, they have people coming in the country without their coming from other countries, mostly from the north of Africa, and the young people coming in France without parents. And so they are taken care of by the care system in France. And so this is a very specific issue that we don't have here in Quebec. But, you know, this is just a very quick idea of what's going on with the French project. But maybe I can put the last word on this. We also have a huge amount of administrative data. So I'm very curious about other people who've worked with such kind of data. We are in, it seems, endless fights to access pretty much everything we can because it's very complicated to get access to the data. But we already have some very huge data set about the entire history of all the young people. We are right now working with the data to try to analyze it in the best possible way. But I'm also interested in other people's experiences about that kind of data, that is hard to get and sometimes very hard to analyze because most of the time this is not clean. So there's a lot of work prior to data analysis with this kind of data.
Quantitative data or qualitative?
This is quantitative data. So what we have right now is all everything that's entered into the care system throughout all our participants' history. So if there was some criminal record at some point when they were 3 years old, anything that has been entered into the care system, we have it, and we have the dates, and we have everything of this. We are working right now to access data from Education Ministry, from Social Work Ministry, from everything that's related to young people transitioning out of care, whether or not they receive governmental services and all of that. I'm not quite sure when exactly we will finally get the data because it's been we've been working on this for about 3 years now. I'm at Martin's chair. I've been there for 2 years, and they were working on it 2 years before I got in, and so it's about 4 years now that we're into this this project, trying to get the data. We will eventually get it, but I'm not quite sure when. But right now I'm kind of debating different ways to analyze the very rich data that we already have. As I said, we have pretty much everything has been entered into the care system about every participant in our study, but also about all young people who were eligible to participate in our study. So that's pretty much our target population.
Wow. So on one side, there is
Our
a
time
data
is-
overdose in your country, and in my country, there is always data deficit. And the biggest, sorrow is how do you get the data? Because, in the care system, I don't know why, but as soon as you are out, you are 18, you don't find the data about those young people and where have they disappeared? And like, especially in the gender participation, we find girls really get lost. They get married or they move from one place to another, or it's so difficult to connect with them. So I wonder if you people also have this kind of a problem.
So we need to move back. We've got 2 minutes in the next session. So I want to thank you all very much for your participation. I unfortunately had to move between internet providers, so the chat seems to have disappeared. If you would just before we close, just quickly type your name. If you're registered, I'll have your email address on the attendance, the RSVP, but just so that we get your name. And thank you so much for this lovely participation. It was good to meet people like-minded, doing similar work and asking similar questions. And I'll make sure that we share this recording and the notes from it with you afterwards, as well as the chat. There's some links there. And if anything got lost along the way, we can perhaps just share that via email afterwards. It might also just be worth quickly mentioning that INTRAC is establishing these thematic interest groups that run continuously. So you'll already see 2 on the website, one on disability and one on higher education. We may want to think about establishing a group on longitudinal research that has a sort of more methodological focus. And so if you're interested in that, let's chat on email afterwards.